Control to stage crew. Kalen's off pattern. Do you see this?
Stand by! Stand by! He's refusing the cue!
Emergency protocol, now. He's got Marina. Shut it down.
The frantic voices crackled through headsets, cutting like knives through the polished illusion of the show. A heartbeat later, chaos erupted. Nero surged from the depths. A violent explosion of black and white power, his jaws locking around Jessica Radcliffe as the crowd screamed in disbelief. This wasn't a stunt. This wasn't rehearsed. This was real, and it hit different. Jessica had always been the calm center of Blue Wave Marine Park. The trainer whose bond with Nero seemed unshakable. But trust is a dangerous currency. Under captivity, it doesn't fade. It breaks. And when it broke that day, it collapsed in front of thousands, dragging a dream into horror. 7 minutes of terror. 7 minutes where music turned to sirens, where applause drowned in blood and silence. Let that sink in. So tell me, was Nero the monster they called him, or a prisoner who finally snapped? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe, because these are the stories no one can afford to forget. Every fairy tale begins with a princess. Ours began with a whale. It sounds poetic, almost harmless, until you remember that this particular prince weighed 11,000 pounds and carried a jaw built for crushing bone. Yet the world wanted to believe in the story girl meets ocean. Ocean bows to girl. Applause follows like destiny. We bought the illusion ticket by ticket as if nature could ever be reduced to choreography. But Jessica Radcliffe didn't see illusions. She saw truth. And the truth terrified her as much as it drew her in. From childhood, she was tethered to the sea like it was an umbilical cord that never snapped. While her friends played beneath neon lights, Jessica sat by the shore, hair tangled in salt wind, tracing the echoes of whales she had only read about. Her notebooks filled with sketches. Her lips shaped their songs until her voice blurred with the waves. By 16, her hands were raw from scrubbing tanks at the local aquarium. She wasn't chasing glamour. She was chasing answers. Do they dream? Do they remember freedom? At 24, she walked across a graduation stage with honors in marine biology. But degrees were never her real achievement. Her real gift was presence. She moved among orcas with something more powerful than whistles or fish buckets, her calm. Her reverence. She didn't demand obedience. She asked for trust, and they gave it to her over and over until trainers whispered she was different, until children in the stands chanted her name. But trust in the shadow of captivity is a loaded gun. It can make you a star. It can keep you blind. And one day, it can pull you beneath the surface where applause drowns into silence and fairy tales meet their cruelest ending. Blue Wave Marine Park knew how to sell dreams, shimmering pools, music swelling through hidden speakers, trainers waving with smiles polished to perfection. To the audience, it was magic. To Jessica Radcliffe, it was theater. Beautiful, yes, but built on shadows. From the very first show, she stood out, not because she shouted louder or demanded the spotlight, but because she didn't need to. Children squealed her name when she waved. Parents leaned forward as if she carried some secret no one else could see. Her movements were graceful, her commands subtle, where others raised their arms with whistles in hand. Jessica simply looked into Nero's eyes, and he answered. She rose quickly, becoming one of Blue Wave's most beloved trainers. But behind the glass, she saw what others refused to notice: Orca's pacing, teeth worn against steel bars, eyes that had lost their brightness, while managers counted ticket sales. Jessica filed quiet reports. They need rest. They need space. Nero is showing fatigue. Every memo stamped, received, and everyone quietly ignored. Still, Jessica stayed because someone had to, because if she left, who would see Nero not as a showpiece, but as a soul trapped in concrete blue? And that's where the tragedy lies, isn't it? She wasn't blind to the illusion. She knew. Yet, she still chose to carry it, hoping compassion could bend the weight of an industry built on profit. Sometimes I wonder, what would you have done? Would you have walked away or stood where she did? In the spotlight, knowing the risk. If this story stirs something in you, stay with me. The cracks in the illusion are only beginning to show. And what comes next? You won't forget, Nero was the crown jewel of Blue Wave Marine Park. At 11,000 pounds and nearly 23 feet long, he was the reason families bought tickets. The star splashed across billboards, the creature whose every leap was choreographed into awe. To the cheering crowds, he was a marvel. To Jessica Radcliffe, he was a mirror one that reflected something far darker. Captured as a calf off the coast of Iceland, Nero had never known freedom beyond the briefest memories of open water. Decades of captivity carved scars along his sleek body ridges from dominance fights with other males, teeth blunted from gnawing at steel gates. The slow heaviness of a creature meant to roam 100 miles a day, now reduced to circles in a tank. On stage, he was dazzling. Backstage, he was breaking. Jessica was among the few who paid attention. She saw it in the way his pattern slowed in the dullness behind his eyes. Trainers called it a mood. She called it a warning. Nero began to float listlessly at the surface, his massive frame still and unresponsive, tail slaps sharper, louder. Once or twice, he ignored her cues completely. For most, it was nothing. For Jessica, it was everything. You see, that's the thing, red flags don't always wave. Sometimes they just sink. And when they do, most people look away. Jessica didn't. She couldn't. She knew what it meant, even when nobody listened. The truth, Nero wasn't built for this. He wasn't built for endless applause, for the crushing routine of concrete walls and whistles. He was built for the deep, built for silence. And the silence inside him was growing. People say he looks fine to me, but trust me, it hits different when you've spent years looking into the eyes of an animal that remembers freedom. Jessica knew. She felt it long before anyone else dared to admit it. And still, the show went on. Jessica Radcliffe wasn't a woman who raised her voice. She didn't slam her fists on desks or storm out of meetings. Instead, she wrote quiet, precise reports, notes that detailed Nero's sluggish swims, the sharper tail slaps, the moments he ignored commands. She filed them carefully, believing someone, anyone, would read and act. But every report came back the same, a neat stamp received. No action, no change. The show must go on. Management had an answer for everything. Crowds were bigger than ever. Revenue soared. Children left with wide eyes and souvenirs in hand. To question the system was to question the illusion, and illusions don't survive questions. Jessica saw it differently. She didn't see ticket sales. She saw exhaustion carved into Nero's body, the way his dorsal fin sagged lower each year, the way his eyes lingered on the surface as though waiting for a horizon that would never come. And with every ignored warning, she carried the weight alone. She could have left. Others had trainers burned out, walked away, found quieter lives. But Jessica stayed, not out of ambition, out of loyalty. If she didn't fight for him, who would? That was the paradox of her love. It kept her close to Nero, closer than anyone else. But it also kept her tethered to a machine designed to grind compassion into dust. Illusions, though, don't crack slowly. They collapse. And when they do, they take everything with them. Jessica felt it coming. She could sense the silence sharpening into something she couldn't quite name. But still, she zipped up her wetsuit, walked the platforms, and smiled for the crowd. Because sometimes caring isn't enough to change the ending. The morning of March 22nd began like any other. Sunlight shimmered across the polished glass of Blue Waves' main performance tank, turning the water into a mirror that hid more than it revealed. Trainers moved through their routines, radios crackling, clipboards shuffling just another show day to the crowds arriving with wide eyes and dripping ice creams. It was magic waiting to happen. To Jessica Radcliffe, it felt like a storm waiting to break. She had noticed it during pre-show checks. Nero moved slowly, almost lazily, his dorsal fin cutting through the water like a shadow dragging across glass. When she tapped the observation panel, he didn't respond right away, a hesitation. Small, subtle, but to Jessica, it was deafening. She leaned toward the assistant trainer and whispered, "He's off today." The reply was automatic noted. That word again, always noted, never acted on. Backstage, Jessica tied her hair back, zipped up her wetsuit, and checked her headset. Her phone buzzed a text from her mother. "Be safe today. Sweetie, let me know how it goes." Jessica smiled faintly, fingers moving fast. "Always talk after the show." It was the last message she would ever send. At 11:46 a.m., she stepped onto the platform. The music swelled. Families cheered. Children pressed their palms against the glass. Nero breached on cue, drenching the front rows in a glorious arc of water. Gasps, laughter, applause. It was perfection, or so it seemed. But Jessica saw the delay, the stiffness in his movements, the sharper slap of his tail as he dove back under. Still, she adjusted, her body language calm and grounding, masking what she felt inside. To the audience, it looked seamless. To the trainers watching from the sidelines, tension rippled through the air. Jessica knew these signs too well. She knew the silence that pretended to be calm but was anything but. Yet, the show went on. It always went on. And as Jessica waded waist-deep into the performance pool, facing Nero head-on, she carried with her the same fragile belief she had always held, that trust could hold the weight of captivity. She didn't know that within minutes that belief would shatter, dragging her and everyone watching into a nightmare they could never unsee. It happened in a heartbeat. One moment, Jessica stood poised on the submerged platform, hand extended, her calm presence radiating like it always had. The next, Nero surged upward with terrifying force, his jaws clamped around her arm, teeth sinking deep, and in a violent snap of motion, he dragged her beneath the surface. The crowd gasped. For a split second, many thought it was still part of the show. Children cheered. Parents leaned forward. Cameras flashed. But then the water erupted white foam, thrashing black and white muscle, and a human figure flailing helplessly in the chaos. The cheers collapsed into screams. Nero twisted, his massive body rolling through the tank with Jessica locked in his grip. She surfaced briefly, her face breaking the waterline, eyes wide, lungs gasping for air. A scream ripped across the stadium. Then she vanished again, pulled under, swallowed by the storm raging below. On the platforms, trainers moved like lightning. Whistles shrieked. Hands flailed for emergency triggers. Deploy nets. Activate acoustic disruptors. Orders shouted. radios crackling with panic. The underwater tone generators screeched. But Nero barely flinched. He dove deeper, hauling Jessica with him. His immense tail slammed against the water so hard it sprayed into the stands. Jessica fought. Witnesses swore they saw her struggling, twisting, trying to free herself. But every attempt was crushed by Nero's sheer weight. He spun with her in a brutal barrel roll, a maneuver designed in the wild to disorient prey. Her body flashed in and out of sight, an arm reaching, a leg kicking before being ripped back under. The tank frothed red. Gasps turned to wails. Some parents shielded their children's eyes. Others froze. Unable to look away, cameras kept rolling. The illusion of wonder had shattered, leaving only raw horror. 7 minutes. That was all it took. 7 endless minutes of chaos that felt like eternity. Trainers hurled weighted nets, desperate to break Nero's grip. They pounded the surface, shouted commands, begged him to release. But Nero was locked in another world, a world of instinct, rage, or perhaps something no human would ever understand. At 12:08 p.m., silence. The water stilled. Nero surfaced, his massive head rising, jaw finally unclenching. Jessica's limp body slipped free, floating to the surface. Trainers rushed with hooks and poles, dragging her toward the platform. CPR began instantly, hands pressing, voices shouting. But the crowd already knew. The light in her eyes was gone. Nero circled nearby, his dorsal fin slicing the water like a blade. He didn't thrash now. He didn't roar or resist. He simply floated, detached, as if the violence had drained everything from him. In less than 10 minutes, a decade of trust had collapsed into foam and silence. Jessica Radcliffe, beloved trainer, daughter, dreamer, lay motionless beside the pool she had devoted her life to. And Nero, once her partner, now stood as the executioner of an illusion too fragile to survive. The nightmare was no longer hidden behind glass. It was real, it was bloody, and it was unforgettable. The amphitheater emptied in silence. No applause, no laughter. Only the echo of sirens and the faint hollow slap of water against concrete. Where minutes before there had been wonder, now there was horror etched into every face. Parents clutched their children. Ushers guided dazed spectators toward the exits. And trainers stood frozen, dripping. Eyes locked on the water as if it might explain what had just happened. Within hours, headlines screamed across the nation. Killer whale slaughters beloved trainer. Jessica Radcliffe's name flooded every screen, paired with images of her smiling beside Nero, her hand resting on the creature who would end her life. But beneath the sensationalism, a deeper question burned. Was Nero a monster, or was he simply the reflection of our cruelty, caged too long in a world that was never his? Outside Blue Wave's gates, candles flickered in vigil, posters read, "Justice for Jessica," beside others demanding, "Free Nero." Protesters gathered, voices rising against an industry that sold illusion at the price of blood. Inside, Nero floated in isolation, refusing food, his calls low and mournful. Not rage, not triumph, just silence. Jessica's family grieved, but they refused to let her story vanish. Months later, they founded the Jessica Radcliffe Foundation, dedicated to marine mammal safety, to exposing the truth behind the glass. Her death became more than tragedy. It became a reckoning, because in the end, Jessica's bond with Nero was real too. It showed us the fragile line between devotion and danger, between spectacle and sorrows. And when that line snapped, It tore open an illusion the world could no longer ignore. Jessica Radcliffe is gone, but the questions remain. And sometimes the silence of a whale is louder than any roar. In the end, Jessica Radcliffe's story was never just about a single attack. It was about the fragile trust between human and animal, about the illusions we build and the silence that breaks them. She gave her life to the ocean she loved, believing compassion could soften captivity, that reverence could bridge the abyss. But Nero's silence told the truth. Some bonds, no matter how deep, cannot survive the weight of chains. The world saw blood in the water, but beneath it lay something far greater, a reckoning. Jessica became a symbol, not of defeat, but of change. Her name echoes now in protests, in petitions, in whispered questions that will not fade. Do we have the right to cage the wild? At what cost do we demand wonder? And so I ask you, what do you believe? Was Nero a monster or a prisoner who finally broke? Leave your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe because these stories must never be forgotten.